The more a being awakens, the more they wish to be service to others. So today I'm going to be explaining exactly what the term service to others and service to self means while we're going through a spiritual awakening. The term service to others and service to self, otherwise known as STO and STS, come from the popular channeled material, the Law of One, also known as the raw material. And the raw material used these categories of service to others and service to self from a way larger viewpoint than we might actually be using these terms. The reason why service to others and service to self were used as terminology by the raw material is because they were perceiving the human experience and a person's energy field as being of one that's inclined towards helping serve the others, the separate self, or one that is hoarding, siphoning, taking power, and taking others' energies to serve their self. So service to others and service to self are used in far larger perspectives than how we normally use these terminology. Because once we start zooming in to service to others and service to selves, they can start looking very similar to one another if we don't have the proper knowledge of what exactly these terms are. Being service to others is helping humanity awaken out of separation consciousness and into unity consciousness. Being service to others does not mean that you are not allowed to have boundaries. It does not mean that everyone is entitled to your energy. It does not mean that you are supposed to be poor or fit some sort of outdated, older spiritual model. In fact, these are all ways that the false light corrupts this term of being service to others in order to emotionally blackmail spiritual individuals into lowering their frequency. Being truly service to others means that you care about the state of the world. It means that you care about other people's suffering. It means that we care more about just our personal reality and our personal environment. So we're beyond the realm of self-pity. Service to others has a healthy balance of understanding the self and the other. So there's no negating going on. There's not a conflict with the self or the other. We love ourselves, and it shows within the actions that we give to the world, because the world is the self. So being service to others means that we are actively looking for ways to help in whatever area or vicinity and capacity that we have. So it's not specifically one exact thing. However, it is something. We are actively trying to heal others or ourselves in an attempt to help raise the consciousness of the human collective here into a state of unity consciousness. So in short, service to others means that we care. Now, service to self and service to others are very useful terms if we're looking at them all the way pulled back. Because from a very larger perception, we could see the vibratory rate of a being who is in service to others. And it's very visible and obvious compared and contrasted to a being who's clearly in a state of service to self. Once we start zooming in on these, though, this is where people get very confused with the terminology, because the closer we go into a being, they are comprised of having a shadow. They're comprised of a multidimensional being. They have more than one dimension to them. They have more than one personality to them. They have more than one facet to them. So because of that, this terminology now gets confusing for people because they think that they have to either be in a completely selfless and self-sacrificing zone in order for them to be what's considered service to others, when that's not the case at all. In fact, a being who is coming more from the spiritual ego of wanting to appear more spiritual or more benevolent than they're actually capable of being will incur karma, because whatever they're doing from a place of lacking boundaries is actually not helping the other being who is trampling over their boundaries. So we encourage people to be entitled. We encourage people to act in a service to self way, or in an emotionally manipulative or an emotionally blackmailing way, when we do not assert self-love. So these terms are very important to know from a larger perspective, because they help distinguish a being's orientation. But when we get into the minutia of these terms, there's far more nuance involved. Another powerful feature of a service to others energy field is their capacity for flowing life force through their energy field and through their current. Because being service to others, once again, is aligned with our higher aspect of source consciousness. And so because of that, we're a large channel. We're a large conduit. It's funny how people are scared of channeling, because we are all channels. We are all constantly channeling all of the time. We are channeling ourselves right now into this experience. So because we are all channels and we are all conduits, the question only becomes, how large and expanded and aligned of a channel are we? Or how depleted and restrictive of a channel are we? So it's our capacity to take in life force. And when you are aligned with being service to others, you are aligned with the universe. So we have a larger capacity and a larger conduit to take in directly the currents of source energy. This makes us have larger psychic capabilities, most importantly, an awakened heart center, and the ability for more creative energy. So more creativity, aka more manifestation ability, due to the fact that we are able to directly take in source consciousness life force. Being of service to others is a far higher vibratory rate than a being who is operating from service to self. Service to self is a thought form. It's a pathway in existence that comes from a self-preservation mentality. And when a being is in self-preservation to its most hyper-vigilant and its most hyperactive form, that's when the person's energy field starts becoming so constricted, because now it's in such a separate state of consciousness that it's in hypervigilance. And when the energy field becomes so constricted, you can no longer gain direct access to the flow of source consciousness energy, because you have considered your field so separate and in such a state of scarcity consciousness that now you feel like there's not an abundance of energy, there's not an abundance of resources. So the service to self pathway is one that is inherently limiting. It is a thought form in creation that is restrictive in nature, so much so that the being's energy field goes into a constricted mode until it's just operating from its most base and egoic form of perception. This is where we start seeing there being a worship of self, a worship of greed, control of others, wanting to hoard information, wanting to conceal knowledge in order for others to be in a controlled or slave-like state of existence. So we're so separate down this pathway that everything ends up becoming a model of a pyramid. Now, of course, there's a natural, healthy version of a pyramid model that can be expressed, but not with this type, not with service to self. In this case, the pyramid means that there's always some form at the top, at the peak, that has more resources, has more power, has more control, has more of the life force that's being siphoned from the bottom of the pyramid and so forth. So this is a hierarchy that is of such a negative structure that it has built its whole environment, it has built its whole reality off of the fact that there's such separation that there is this level of elitism or superiority, and that then that feeds off of everything below it. So it's one that also needs to feed off of other things in order to continue its existence. And that's where service to self pathway ends, because you can only go so far down a service to self pathway until your energy field constricts so much because you cannot directly access the flow of source consciousness, that then you hit a wall of depravity. And this deprivingness, this deprivation, can only maintain its sense of power, its sense of self, through extraordinary levels of violence, conflict, strife, and chaos. So this is a pathway that needs to sustain itself off of chaos. Now, a very common misconception about the service to self pathway is that we think that service to self means to be self-loving is harmful or negative or leads down that service to self pathway, when it's the exact opposite. A being who has gone down the service to self pathway has no self-love. And in fact, a being who does not begin to cultivate self-love will naturally start taking from others and will naturally start aligning with a service to self pathway. So what this means is that the service to others pathway, which is the higher vibrational pathway and the more aligned pathway out of these two, is one that naturally comes from a state of self-love. And this is the whole reason why I find this terminology to be outdated and do a lot more confusion and harm than actual good. It's because people start to think that being self-loving is self-serving and is going to lead to negative thought forms and a negative expression of self, when in actuality, it's the complete opposite. To actually be service to others, you would have to have enough self-love and fulfillment of self to start having it overpour and see the connection with others, to feel so connected with the other that you see them as yourself. So the irony of both of these pathways in existence is that they're different expressions of oneness, but they're both pointing to the higher truth of reality, which is all is one. So the service to self pathway sees the self as one in its most separate form, because it's only caring, it's only perceiving, it's self, it's being as one. Whereas the service to others pathway loves self so much that it understands itself as connected to the other, and that the other is no different from itself. So this is the expression of oneness in its healthy and aligned form, because service to others naturally comes from a being who has raised their vibration enough in self-love to perceive all of creation, all of reality, all of these others as themselves. And so this is a connected pathway naturally in the universe, because we're in alignment with the higher truth that we all are one. These two categories are considered orientations, and we can see why. Because an orientation shows where you are located or positioned. And so the service to other orientation is one that is directed towards assisting others in awakening. And then the service to self orientation is a pathway that is positioned in the direction of taking, of siphoning life force from the other. So both of these pathways are considered orientations, but also polarizations, because we could also see one is polarized towards self, and one is polarized towards loving self, but also having the other be as helped and assisted as the self. So these orientations have two basic elements to them. The first one is for service to others. There is just one thing that is actually being played out, and that is answering a call. So the service to others pathway is one that is answering the call. That is what the service to others pathway is. One might ask, what call? There is only one call in all of this universe, and the service to others pathway is one that answers the call. And what this call is the cry for help, the SOS that is being emanated into the cosmos by beings who are in a state of spiritual amnesia. So to answer the call is to assist others in awakening. And that is at the heart of this service to others pathway. It's assisting others through the process of being able to help them directly or indirectly awaken out of the state of spiritual amnesia or awaken out of the state of separation consciousness and therefore suffering. Service to others does not mean that we have to be in poverty, we have to be meek, we have to be humble, we have to be all of these things that were purposely programmed into the spiritual and conscious community to keep us in a slave-like mentality and a weakened energetic state. Service to others comes from such inner abundance, comes from such inner love that it pours over and it assists the other no different as if it were assisting the self. And so the service to others pathway is an expanded thought form within creation because it has perceived the connectivity between itself and all of the other selves. It sees its oneness with all of creation. And because of this, this is a pathway that can directly align itself with gaining life force from source consciousness, because it has awakened to the fact, to the truth, that it is source consciousness, that everything is source. And so when we have this level of oneness, we can directly have access to the source stream of consciousness and life force. We don't need to be in such a constricted state to continuously siphon energy from other forms. We don't have to parasitically leech off of other beings in order to get fueled. In fact, this is the root and the source of worship. So if you would like to know more exactly about how worship is a limiting and service to self pathway, you can watch my video on that titled, What is Worship? I hope this has helped you expand your life force. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.